My brothers and sisters, on July 19th of this year, the Sons of the Utah Pioneers placed at This Is the Place Heritage Park in Salt Lake City a statue of the prophet Joseph Smith and his successor, President Brigham Young. This statue, entitled Eyes Westward, shows these two great prophets with a map of the Western Territories. Many people, including Latter-day Saints, forget that Joseph Smith was very much aware that the church would eventually be relocated to the great American West. In August of 1842, he prophesied that the saints would continue to suffer much affliction and would be driven to the Rocky Mountains. Many would apostatize. Others would be put to death by our persecutors or lose their lives in consequence of exposure and disease. And some would live to build cities and see the saints become a mighty people in the midst of the Rocky Mountains. Even Joseph's closest associates in those early years did not fully understand the trials that Latter-day Saints would endure as the church rolled forth from its small beginnings in the early 1800s. But Joseph Smith knew that no enemy, then or present, in the future would have sufficient power to frustrate or stop the purposes of God. We're all familiar with his prophetic words. The standard of truth has been erected. No unhallowed hand can stop the work from progressing. Persecutions may rage, mobs may combine, armies may assemble, calumny may defame, but the truth of God will go forth boldly, nobly, and independent till it has penetrated every continent, visited every clime, swept every country, and sounded in every ear, till the purposes of God shall be accomplished, and the great Jehovah shall say, the work is done. Nearly 18 decades have passed since the organization of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in 1830. We've had 178 years to observe the fulfillment of prophecy and to watch the truth of God as it goes forth boldly and nobly and independent. The church began its first decade with only a few members. Despite intense opposition, 597 missionaries were called during the 1830s, and over 15,000 converts were baptized into the church. The United States, Canada, and Great Britain were open to the preaching of the gospel. There were many converts during the 1840s, while persecutions continued to rage against the church, and especially against the prophet Joseph. In the midst of these difficulties, and despite the great challenges of travel, the restored gospel of Jesus Christ continued to cover more of the earth through the faithful service of 1,454 missionaries called during the 1840s. And the church membership grew to more than 48,000. On December 27th, 1844, the persecution of Joseph Smith culminated when he and his brother Hiram were killed by a mob in the Carthage jail. Soon after the martyrdom, and in the fulfillment of Joseph's vision, Brigham Young and the church began preparations to move to the Rocky Mountains. Hardship, affliction, death, and apostasy were ever present. Still, the work moved forward, and in the 1850s, some 705 missionaries were called to serve in the areas including Scandinavia, France, Italy, Switzerland, and Hawaii. Missionary work also began in such diverse parts of the world as India, Hong Kong, Thailand, Burma, South Africa, and the West Indies. Among faithful converts from Scandinavia and Britain, baptized during the decade of the 1850s, were those who suffered and died on land and on the seas, as they journeyed to join with the saints here in the Rocky Mountains. In 1875, the first 7 missionaries were called to Mexico, and the work flourished even amidst revolution and other challenges. And it was just 4 years ago, in 2004, that the church reached the milestone of 1 million members in Mexico. The faith of the saints was tested in every footstep as Brigham Young led them to build temples and establish more than 350 colonies in the West. By the time Brigham Young died in 1877, worldwide church membership had grown to more than 115,000. Despite all of the persecution of the truth of God, was indeed going forth boldly and nobly. Time does not allow a detailed review of the growth of the church during the next few decades, but it should be noted that during the 40-year period from 1890 to 1930, while the church and its doctrine were still under public attack, Elder Reed Smoot was elected to the United States Congress and had to fight to be seated. A great deal was said of the church and its teachings during that time, much of it hurtful and directed towards President Joseph F. Smith and other church leaders. However, some newspaper articles began to speak of members of the church as contributing citizens and good people. On September 3rd, 1925, President Heber J. Grant announced that the church would begin missionary work in South America. Following the Lord's pattern for taking the restored gospel to all nations, my paternal grandfather, Elder Melvin J. Ballard, of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, was among those who were sent to South America to dedicate the land for the preaching of the gospel. On Christmas morning of 1925 in Argentina, Elder Ballard dedicated South American countries and started missionary work. Before leaving the following July, he prophesied, "The work of the Lord will grow slowly for a time here, just as an oak grows slowly from an acorn. It will not shoot up in a day as does the sunflower that grows quickly then dies. But thousands will join the church here. It will be divided into more than one mission and will be one of the strongest in the church. The church here is the smallest that it will ever be." Anyone familiar with the growth of the church in South America knows that fulfillment of that prophecy. Today, Brazil alone has over 1 million members. During the 4 decades from 1930 to 1970, more than 106,000 missionaries were called to serve worldwide. Church membership then increased 4-fold to over 2,800,000.